Hi, my name is Jeanine Tesori, and this is my life in the theater. Okay, there should be a music cue when this opens. How old are you? Well, I'm a binder old. We start with The Secret Garden. This is a big one for me. Lucy Simon wrote this. A lot of my life in the theater began because I was the dance ranger for this. I had been gigging before that. I don't even know if people say gigging anymore. Do you say gigging? But anyway, I guess I do. I was hired by Michael Lichtenfeld and Susan Schulman to be the dance arranger because someone else didn't work out. And I was a pianist. I drove all night before the first rehearsal. That's when I could do things like that, drive all night. I watched all of these women make this show in the room. It was one of 3 shows that I did at the St. James in a row. I was the sub-assistant conductor for Gypsy with Tyne Daly at the St. James, and I did The Secret Garden. And then I did Tommy right after that. And so that every time I go into the St. James, and it's like ghosts of me having a great time, weeping, playing the piano. I was just there at New York the other night, and it's just such an unbelievable memory for me. So I loved that show. I still have the jacket. Oh, well, here we go, Tommy. So Tommy was also a really, really big deal. And the interesting thing about Tommy was I did a lot of shows with Des McAnuff. And Wayne Salento, who was the choreographer, famously did Wicked, but he's done a ton of work. He just did Dance in the Revival. I ended up doing this in Germany, which was one of the very few shows that I was a music director for. It sort of gave me the courage to do it. It was an amazingly skilled show, and watching Des put it together, it was also where we got the idea for Fun Home to put Allison into the narrative. At the end of Act 1 in Tommy, played by Michael Cerveris, who ended up playing Bruce, you know when you're old enough, it's just like this is what happens. There's a point where he goes from being the narrator, and at the end of Act 1, everybody's in front of him. I can still tell you the metronome marking. Then the ensemble pulls apart, and you see him playing the pinball, and he's in the age. And I remember saying to Lisa Crone, when we were first doing Fun Home, there's a moment at the end of the first act of Tommy, and it belongs here somewhere because Allison has to go into her own story, right? And I took her to the Toft Theater on Film, and we watched it, and that's where it came from. Just a bit of lore. So How to Succeed was also with Des. We did it in California, I think at La Jolla. We did it in La Jolla first. And this was the same team with Danny Trube, Ted Sperling, and I did the Brotherhood of Man arrangement for Lilius. I put it together with Lilius, and then Ted did all of the vocal arrangements for it. And during this, and we went to Washington too. We went to DC. And during this, I moved to Germany for a year to do Tommy in Germany, which was sort of amazing because to head everything out in Germany and to move there at the same time that we did How to Succeed was sort of incredible. Oh my God. So Dream was directed by Wayne Salento. It was the first show that I did. I found out that I was pregnant. My husband and I were, I guess that we were trying to have a baby, and everyone around us was having, it took us a couple years. It took me 1 week to get pregnant, so I was pregnant during that. And while we were in rehearsals, we went down to Nashville first to do this. It was such an incredible show. It was about the music of Johnny Mercer, but it was also produced by someone who I think maybe is in jail. Anyway, every Friday we would get paid, and we would all run to the bank. We'd run to the bank because some of the checks wouldn't clear. Those were the days. Anyway, okay. So in Sound of Music, this was the first musical that I did while I was super duper pregnant. And the thing that is so incredible about this, Susan Schulman, Heidi Ettinger, Michael Lichtenfeld, we sort of continued on as a merry band of people. Heidi did the set. I think it was at where Moulin Rouge is now, I think. Laura Benanti was 19, and she was cast as the understudy to Rebecca. Oh my God, I haven't thought about this in so long. And I remember so distinctly going into I did the dance music and the incidental music, and going into the first orchestra rehearsal. And I was super pregnant. And I remember thinking, God, I've worked so hard to hide the fact that I have a uterus. And now it's like, whoa, out to here. And Cece, my daughter, she was like moving around. I was like, well, there's no hiding it now. You know, to have a baby in this business, especially, Sienna was born in 1997. There were very few of us who were having kids. And those who were having kids, especially the actors, you would have to sort of not hide it, but you couldn't do what you do now, which is bring your kids in. And I had my baby shower at the King and I in the lobby because my husband was conducting the King and I, and all those little kids, they came down and all gave me these little presents. It was so incredible. So we have grown up. I have grown up in this business. And I feel like, you know, the people who have most protected me were not the most powerful people, but they were the most creative. I got Twelfth Night because I had written Violet, and Nick Heitner heard it. Ira Weitzman, who was a big, that was a big thing for me at Lincoln Center with Andre Bishop. They introduced me to Nick, and my daughter was 6 months old, and Nick said, oh my God, I remember I met him, and it was like Nick Heitner. Right before he came and met me for coffee, I looked down and I had jelly and a little bit of spit up. And I remember thinking, well, you know what? That's what it is. I have jelly and spit up, and there you go. And we had this incredible meeting, and he said the kind of music he wanted, which was 60 minutes of music, sort of like to score it like a movie, but there was going to be maybe 3 weeks in which to do it. And I said to him, okay, so I have a kid, and she's 6 months old, and by then she'll be 9, because we met with plenty of time. I don't think I can do it. And he said, well, just bring her. And no one had ever said that to me. I'd never seen that. I'd never heard anybody say, well, just bring her. Like Sienna, my daughter learned how to crawl in the lobby of Lincoln Center in the Beaumont. And we used to visit the guard who just retired. She used to run into his arms until she was like 20. Then it got weird. So Twelfth Night was it was my first nomination. And that happened because Thomas Cott made sure that people saw it and considered it, you know, as a score. Parade was playing and of course won because it's a beautiful score, but this was such a huge thing for me because it was the first thing I wrote when I had a baby. Swing, my then husband, Michael Rafter, was the MD for this. I did a little bit of work on it, and we all went out to LA, and we did it as a family, you know, Swing, and we had an incredible time, a really wonderful time. So I also helped, you know, we used to, and we sometimes do this now. It's not as common that you doctor each other's shows. Someone will bring you in and say that our second act is having blah, 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 and you come in and you sort of, you can help out in a way because you're not in the goo. And I did that for one of Michael Mayer's shows, and I helped him before that on something called Triumph of Love. And I ended up writing literally 4 measures or 8 measures or something when the composer was a little stuck. And it was obviously not credited. It's like, you know, just what you do. And Dick Scanlon said, you know, that song in there I really love, especially that little section. And Michael was like, Jeanine wrote that. So Dick asked me about doing Thoroughly Modern Millie with him, and it was supposed to be a jukebox musical with American Songbook. And I thought, look, I need a gig. We started writing, and then I was like, oh, Dick, it's so hard to keep looking in the library. So let's just write some. And one of the first songs we wrote was Forget About the Boy, which, if you look at the song, it's based on the harmony of Jimmy. And that's why, because we were still using the other material. We had a really incredible time on this. We got one of the worst reviews I have ever not read. I read the first paragraph and then I went to bed. It was something to do with circus ponies. It was so terrible. It was like, wow, that's a. I remember the producer saying, oh, we have a mixed review. I was like, girl, if that's mixed. So the next morning, the whole team, we all met at Sardi's to toast our show because we figured we would close. And then we didn't. And then we ran, and we won the Tony for Best Musical. Caroline or Change. Wow, so Caroline or Change was the first time I worked with George C. Wolfe, who is one of my dearest friends. The story of this was, I was doing another project with Craig Lucas and Tony Kushner. We were doing Don Juan DeMarco. It just sort of fell apart. It didn't really lend itself, but we had a really good time writing it. Tony had sent me the script for Caroline or Change years before, or at least a year before. It was incredible, but it felt like there's no room for music. It was so fantastical and beautifully built. And so I said, I can't do it because I can't find myself in it. I can't find where music would be. So we started writing something else. And then after that came apart, it was clear that we wrote really well together. And he said, I have this other project, will you look at it? And so we looked at it again, and I realized that, oh, there was a lot of room, we just had to make it and get in there. And so we started writing it. We opened at the Public. The original composer was Bobby McFerrin, and they were supposed to do it for the San Francisco Opera. And I think he even wrote a little bit for it, maybe for the washing machine, but then he didn't want to do it, so I sort of inherited the gig. It was the beginning of my history with Tony and with George, with whom I'm working with right now. We still have a Monday night Zoom with almost all the original women in this cast. We've done it for years on Monday nights, and Radio 1, Ramona Keller is one of my best friends. So you see, like, every show threads into your life in a way. And then we moved to Broadway, and it gave us a second chance, to really look at the show. Anika Noni Rose won the Tony for Best Featured. It was incredible. Shrek the Musical. So Shrek the Musical and Kimberly Akimbo are in direct dialogue with each other because I did not know David at all, David Lindsay Aver. And it was an arranged marriage. I had to audition to get the job for Shrek because there's never enough ways to, feel bad about yourself. So I got this musical, and they paired us with another lyricist, and a British lyricist who didn't quite get the American humor. And so I said to David, you should do it. You should write the lyrics because your words they're already dynamic and musical. And that started everything. And again, we went out of town. We were out of town in Seattle, and I have not been back since, although I love Seattle. It's just, there's just residue of my tears. Anyway, it was a really wonderful beginning of lots of relationships. Jason Moore, Bill Damashki is still, such a big part of our lives. And a lot of people have done this musical. So we're putting out a tour of a different way of seeing Shrek now that a lot of young people have done it. And I think a lot of people sort of sniff at Shrek. One person literally said, I love all of your work, except for Shrek, of course. And I was like, you're not on a screen, right? I can hear you. And I thought, I didn't even realize that they assumed that I think the thing stinks. And I don't. I think it's yet to be discovered for what's inside of that piece. But David and I formed a lifelong bond over it for many reasons. Free Men of Color, I think it's a magnificent play. I think it's a masterpiece. John Guare, I wrote the music for it, the incidental music. It was an important moment, I think, in terms of watching what Jeffrey Wright does on stage and his collaboration with George C. Wolfe and Mos Def. Vianne Cox was in it. It was a really important way for me to start working live music and taped music. It was in the Beaumont, which is, I just saw Camelot, and I called Bart Shear, and that space there's no space like that in New York City, that space. The depth, and Twelfth Night was there, and it's that feeling, like when people are coming up stage, you feel like they're coming from Staten Island. And when they're coming down to you, it just is an epic feeling. And watching Jeffrey with John Guare, just one of those experiences. And one of the things that I started doing on this play, Free Man of Color, was I sat down and I started interviewing John Guare about his own script so I could understand what was happening musically. And it's a thing that has continued for me when working with playwrights. And that leads to Violet. Yeah, Violet was a big deal for me because it was my first show that was done in New York, that was mine. It took 17 years to go to Broadway, which is the usual, I think, for me. Pretty short. Violet was not only important for me because the original cast, which included Lauren Ward, who then played Rose in Caroline or Change in London, but Michael McElroy, who was the original Flick, who I still see and talk to all the time. But this was the start. I did a program at City Center called Encores Off Center. And they asked me to produce one of my own works, and I thought that was just like, ugh. I said, I don't want to promote myself. I took this job because I want to, look at the shows that I love, and, Mickey Grant, Liz Suedos, Linda Twine, all of these other people and artists that were playing at, the history of off-Broadway, not me. And the head of the board just asked that I do one. So we did Violet as, I think it was one night or something. And when I first heard Sutton at a music rehearsal, I thought, oh wow, this is a great part for you. It hadn't even occurred to me. And then I remember hearing her through the wall, and Michael Rafter, who had done the off-Broadway, also did this. So it was a real reunion of a lot of people. Around that time when I was taking that on, Lisa Krohn had sent me the book to Fun Home, Alison Bechdel's incredible graphic novel. And the moment I got it, I know exactly where I was. I looked through it and I thought, oh, this is going to be an incredible musical, and it's going to be hell. It's going to be hell, and it was, but not because of the people. It was hell to figure out because as source material, and all of these things you think about the source material, the Fun Home source material is this epic, non-linear graphic novel. So it's basically storyboarded itself, and how does that become dramatic? And Lisa and I went through with Sam Gold. There's actually a picture of us at a certain point literally climbing the walls because we used to put up index cards, which I still do, and try to figure out, well, where does Ring of Keys go? Is it number 9? Is it number 4? Is it a ringtone when people leave? Like, where does it go? Why is it there? When you're working with memory, I found it was so hard to figure out. Fun Home was really beloved for me, but it was one of the first times that I did a musical as a lab, which I also have used since. So you do production and you charge like $10. And people come in, and we did it at the little theater at the Public during the Hurricane Sandy. That's how I remember, because it shut us down. Sam used to come out, Sam Gold, with this like crazy hat and a beer, and he would say, you're gonna leave here and you're gonna say, that needs work, and you're going to be right, which is why we want you here. It was such a beautiful invitation to not be, to sit back and judge, but to be part of the experience for an audience. I really loved it. And then we went to the Newman, and then, because Sam has done Fun Home in every which way except on ice, but wait for an announcement because it's coming soon. Then we went to the Round, and I think we went to the Round because I suspect it's because no theater wanted us. I'm not sure that's the case, but I think that's the case. And so I'd never done theater in the Round. I saw one musical in the Round when I was a kid. It was Zorba at Westbury Music Fair, which I don't even know is still there, on Long Island. And they did it in the round, and it was fantastic. And I said to Sam, I don't know how a musical in the round works. And he said, don't worry, I've got this. I understand stuff in the round. It's my favorite place. I don't know if he was kidding or just trying to, like, you know, calm me, probably both, but he is the master of being in the round. And the thing that he said, which I'll never forget, is it will work in the round because memory surrounds you at all times. And even what I was talking about at the St. James, when I go to the St. James or any of these theaters, which I've been like so lucky enough to get to work on all of these, all those people, all the people that we lost during AIDS, during this show and that show and this show, they're all there. It's like The Inheritance. It's like Craig Lucas's longtime companion. At the end, when they all come back, they're all still there. If you're lucky enough, you know, to stick around in this business. And he was so right. It was so beautiful. This Carolina changed. So the story behind this one, Tony and I had heard that there was this really great production in Chichester. I just liked saying it, Chichester. And I love the Chichester Psalms, Bernstein, favorite piece. And so he and I went over with our roly-poly suitcases. We got on a train and we went to Chichester. And we went to the last matinee of this unbelievable production by Michael Longhurst at the Chichester Festival, and Lauren Ward was in it, who was the first Violet. Michael Longhurst had never directed a musical. I love working with people who have never fill in the blank, because they bring a newness to what they see and what they hear. There is no like, we don't, in musicals, we don't, which is the enemy of art. It's an art assassin. And he just found things and sculpted them out in this musical in this incredible way. And we came out there just so stunned that we had come upon this beautiful production. And then it transferred to the Hampstead, and then it transferred West End. And then it was about to open. We were about to have our dress rehearsal at 7 o'clock, and the pandemic lockdown started in March 2020. And Todd Hames, who died only a month ago, for whom there will be one of his theaters will be named for him, kept that show and that set up that entire time. We went and visited, and the set was there, and there was an inch of dust on everything. And I thought, well, metaphor. And that sort of leads to Kimberly Akimbo. I love working with playwrights because they bring something, I think, to musicals which is in their plays, and has to do with structure and a certain way of hearing and seeing the world. I've been really happy to work with a lot of them. David and I, as soon as we finished, literally the next morning after Shrek opened, the morning after, he said, what do you want to do next? And I thought, oh, I want to go into law next. Oh, but if you're talking about musicals, okay. Well then, he said, look, let's work in a way like I do a play, which is, I'm alone in my office, and it's bad until it's good. Hopefully someday it's good. We worked, just the two of us, for quite a while because of the way we wanted to work. We've discovered the best way to work is to keep it really private until it needs to start expanding. You don't show it to anybody, and no one gets to judge it or talk about it or any of that stuff, because I love the internet, but there's no hiding now. People have opinions, and I love people's opinions. You need them, but sometimes you don't want them to be published because they're powerful. They begin to create something that means that people don't go into your play like blank slates. Even they've heard one thing, they have information with which they sit. I said, oh, I would love to do that. Let's do one of your plays. And we were in his office, and I was like, how about this play, which I love, which is about how I feel so often in this business, starting at 19, and I felt so old, in a sense, because my sisters and I were sort of raised to be super tough, and we weren't. And this is a musical that's about someone who looks to the world in a certain way, and the world treats her in a certain way, but she's 16. And she realizes in a very short amount of time, when you know how long you have, or even if you don't, you should live until you die as opposed to start dying while you live. We always knew we were working with David Stone. We had decided that before the first note was written that we were going to work together. Jessica Stone was directing Ripcord in Boston. She did How to Succeed, and I'm not sure we ever really met. She took over in How to Succeed when I was in Germany, but Jess was always really known for her comedy and for her surgical work. She directs comedy really well. Directing musical comedy is very hard. Very few people sort of have the experience, and she does. As we started with our creative team, we started thinking about, it was a long development period. We did Sundance, we did workshops, we did, you just want to keep testing what it sounds like out loud, because theater isn't a literary experience. It's life, on stage. It has to be lived on stage. And in looking for the Kimberly, I serve on a board of the Kurt Weill Foundation, which is a beautiful foundation. And Vicki and I have served on that board for quite a while together. We were at a meeting, and I was looking at her. She was right across from me, and I immediately texted David and said, it's Vicki. There was something about her. I think we forget how funny she is because she's done so many classically serious, and because she's regal, she has like a La Reina about her. She has that elegance, but she's a goon. She's a goofball, and very funny, really good with physical comedy. And I saw that, and I saw that twinkle in her eye, like that glint of being in on the joke. And we met and went through the music because she had questions about how it would sit in her voice. I said, but Kimberly's voice, like her body, has been touched by time, and so are the vocal cords. So she can't sing like everybody else. She actually mustn't sing like everybody else, because even though it's a fictional disease, it manifests as an aging her cells of her body as they prepare for the end of her life. She's running out of time. She is, one of those, what do they call them, the hourglasses. She's like that. And that started our thinking about how to cast this in a similar way for me to Fun Home. The kids who are in Fun Home, I love that Sydney, it felt like she went to get a ticket to Fun Home and then wandered onto the stage. That the people in the audience didn't feel very different from the people on stage. And I love that about Kimberly too. And part of it is because David and I used so many stories from our families inside. Like The Inevitable Turn is absolutely my family. Back in the day, you just weren't sure, is the turkey gonna fly? Is this holiday dinner gonna go well? Yes, yes. Oh no, oh no, he said that one thing and it was just sort of done. So we're all in there, and just as if like everybody brings their experience to it. And especially for the teen quartet, I didn't, and we didn't want to use people who needed tutoring, because it's really hard. The Fun Home kids, the kids in Caroline Change, they form such bonds. It's unbelievable to watch them grow up. But the cost is really high for them and their parents. And I didn't want to really go through that again, of watching kids have to skip school. I love writing for children, but it's a big deal. They have to stop school, and their parents, if you tour, the parents come with them, and there's something so great about it, but there's something that's really hard about what they have to sacrifice for that. And so we basically cast people who are 19, 20, 21 to play the teens. And so there were a lot of Broadway debuts inside that. Justin Cooley, who plays Seth, came to us because Jessica saw the Jimmy Awards. He was so winning, even though he didn't win. He came up his senior year of high school. He didn't go to college. He did a Broadway show instead, or he did an off-Broadway show. His family was completely behind him. His mother started him out in an apartment, and then he made his Broadway debut. And seeing him learn from Vicki, who was slightly older than Justin at the Booth Theater when she understudied, just having graduated from Yale. It's just like the great thing about getting older There's so many not great things, but one of the really great things is that the people from here sometimes work with the people from here. And I'm like, maybe like, you know, part of the binder that holds them together. I don't know. So there's something so really beautiful. Also, it's laminated, so that's good.